Chapter 2. Will woke at first light. He made a hurried breakfast of coffee and toasted flatbread, with wild honey added to both. The night had been clear, and he hadn't bothered to pitch a tent. He had made do with the oiled canvas bedroll that was a new part of Ranger equipment. Waterproof on the outside, it contained a thin but comfortable woolen mattress and a blanket inside. It was far superior to the old system of rolling blankets on the ground, and, in the event that it did rain, there was a waterproof hood that could be raised to keep the occupant dry. Tug eyed him curiously as he packed up the camp. "So, are we hunting the wolf this morning?" "Not immediately," Will said, as he tied the bedroll behind Tug's saddle. "I want to ask around some of the other farms first." There was always the chance that the attack at the Complepes farm had been an aberration, he thought. But by the time he had visited 3 of the other farms in the immediate area, he knew that wasn't the case. 2 of the farmers reported stock losses in the past weeks. One thought he had seen a large dog in the area. The 3rd farmer hadn't remarked on any missing stock, but his farm was furthest to the east. "Maybe the wolf hasn't reached this far yet," Will said to Tug. The horse shook his mane. That passed for a shrug in horse body language, Will thought. By early afternoon, he had retraced his steps to the Complepes farm and was casting about for the wolf's tracks. They were fairly obvious for the first 100 meters. But then, as the panic had subsided, the wolf had regained his cunning and reverted to his natural ways. Missing leg or not, he was a clever and resourceful opponent. He had backtracked several times and headed across hard ground where little sign of his passing would remain. But Will was a skilled tracker, as all rangers were, and he quickly discerned a base course in the wolf's movements, so that when he lost the trail, he could cast around in that general direction until he found signs of the wolf's passing again. "I wish we didn't have to do this," he said, as he swung down from the saddle for the 10th time to study the ground ahead of him. A short while ago, the wolf had sidetracked through a rocky patch to the right. Will had continued heading in his original direction, taking a slight detour to the right. Holt would have frowned at him for taking such a shortcut and trusting to luck that he would cross the wolf's trail once more. Normal practice was to move forward slowly, sweeping in an ever-increasing arc until the tracker caught sight of the wolf's tracks once more. But by now, Will was fairly sure of the direction the wolf was headed, and he thought he could take the chance. "He's probably got a lair somewhere up here," he said to Tug. The horse said nothing. Tug knew he was taking a shortcut, and he wanted Will to know that he knew. "You're as bad as Holt," Will said, then emitted a low cry of triumph when he caught sight of a paw print in soft sand just ahead of him, then another. "I told you so," he said. Tug remained silent. A few meters further along, a tuft of black fur clung to a thorny vine, and Will knew he was on the right track once more. In fact, the wolf did have a lair in the area. It was on a small rocky hill that commanded a view of the surrounding countryside. A shelf of rock jutted out from its neighbors and provided a sheltered hollow that the wolf had taken for his base. He had returned there the previous day and spent the night. Then, earlier this morning, his stomach rumbling with hunger, he had left again to scout the area for food. It wasn't long before he became aware of a foreign presence close by. 2 presences, in fact. He sensed that they posed a danger to him, and instinct told him he must not let them discover his home. Moving carefully despite the limp, he swung in an arc that took him beside and behind the 2 creatures. He noted their direction of travel and confirmed that they were indeed heading towards his lair. He retraced his steps. There was a deep thicket ahead of them that would provide cover for him. He could lie in wait for them there. He moved into the thicket, crouched belly to the ground, wriggling forward until he could see the trail down which the two creatures would come. The wind was behind them, and he soon caught their scent. It was one that he had only experienced in recent times, the scent of humans. Satisfied that they wouldn't scent him, he lay still, his amber eyes unblinking as they came into sight. For a moment, his eyes narrowed. He could smell 2 foreign scents, but he could only see one intruder. It was large and 4-legged. He had seen a smaller creature with it earlier, when he caught sight of them from a distance. He could smell the second presence, but couldn't see it. The 4-legged creature stopped, and the wolf emitted an almost inaudible grunt of surprise as he realized the smaller figure was riding on top of the larger. As he watched, it detached itself and swung down, moving forward a few paces, head bent, studying the ground. The larger animal followed it, staying a few paces behind. The larger animal posed the greater danger, the wolf decided. He flattened himself even closer to the ground, concealed by the bushes and the shadows beneath them, as the two creatures came closer to his hiding spot. The smaller one was making noises now. A strange thing to do when you were following a dangerous enemy, the wolf thought. And he was definitely their enemy, and decidedly dangerous. "Here we are again, Tug," Will said, tracing the outline of a canine pad print in the dirt. "Still heading northwest." Tug emitted a low rumble. He raised his head and sniffed the air, trying to discern some foreign scent that would explain the overwhelming sense of danger he was feeling. He didn't like this situation. He didn't like Will going ahead on foot when there might be danger present. He never did like that. Tug wanted Will safe in the saddle, where Tug's speed and agility could protect him from a sudden attack. "You're a worrywart," Will told him. He had heard Tug's sound and knew exactly what his horse was thinking. "Just settle down, I'm safe enough. This trail is half a day old. The wolf is nowhere near us." The trail was an old one, but Will had no way of knowing that the wolf had left his lair again, discovered them approaching, and was now intent on protecting his home territory. The wolf's tensed muscles trembled slightly in anticipation. Then he calmed himself and lay motionless again, his eyes unblinking, locked on the two figures. The smaller animal was nearly level with him now. He knew if he attacked it, the larger one would be able to rush to its defense. Better take care of the bigger one first. The smaller animal moved past his hiding place, and its large, long-legged companion moved forward too, until it was almost level with the spot where the wolf lay concealed. In spite of himself, another tremor of anticipation ran through the wolf's body. Tug looked up. He had heard something, or sensed something. He wasn't sure. But there was something close by. Something bad. He rumbled a low warning again. Will looked round at him and grinned. "What is it now?" he asked. "It can't be our friend the wolf. He's definitely heading this way." He pointed in the direction the wolf had been following and moved forward. Ears pricked, senses screaming a warning, Tug followed, stepping nervously. A blue jay darted away from a low bush close by with a sudden flurry of wings. Both Will and Tug started nervously. Then Will laughed at his old companion. "Ha! Happy now? It was nothing but a big bad blue jay," he said. Tug shook his mane angrily. He had been sure there was something. The wolf attacked. Tug was aware of a sudden, violent rush of movement from a thicket behind where he stood. He whirled to face the direction of danger, spinning on his rear hooves. But the wolf, now clear of the bushes, was already leaping for his throat, fangs bared. Realizing the danger, Tug reversed his spin awkwardly, turning away from those slashing teeth. The wolf crashed into his right side, sending him staggering, and Tug felt those fangs raking down his shoulder, gouging deep into the muscles there and sending hot blood cascading down his foreleg. The wolf hung on, his fangs ripping and tearing deeper and deeper into the muscle as he shook his head savagely. Tug whinnied. As his front hooves came back to earth, he tried to bring his rear hooves up to kick at his attacker. But his right front leg was badly injured, muscles and tendons torn and lacerated, and it faltered under him. He lurched away, stumbling as it refused to bear his weight. Finally, the wolf tore free from its terrible grip. It hit the ground and rolled, then crouched beneath Tug, teeth bared, for another attack. Will's arrow slammed into its side, with all the force of his bow's 80-pound draw weight behind it, from a range of less than 4 meters. The arrow ripped through the wolf's body, tearing organs and rupturing blood vessels and destroying its heart on the way, killing the beast instantly. It fell to the ground, eyes glazed, with 9 centimeters of the arrow protruding from its far side. "Tug!" Will's cry was almost a scream. At first, he thought Tug had evaded the wolf's attack. Now he could see the torn flesh of his horse's shoulder, the gleaming white of exposed bone and tendon, and the bright blood streaming down Tug's right foreleg. Will threw the bow aside and rushed to his horse, tears forming in his eyes and coursing down his cheeks. He threw his right arm around Tug's neck and reached clumsily with his left to touch the terrible wound. Tug balanced on 3 legs, placing no weight on the injured limb. He whinnied in surprise as the shock wore off and he felt the first throbbing pain from the injury. "Oh God, Tug! Oh God!" Will was momentarily helpless at the sight of his injured horse. In all their years together, he had never seen Tug so badly wounded. Now, faced with this terrible, red-pumping gash, his mind froze, refusing to accept what had happened, refusing to think about what he must do next. Then his training reasserted itself. He had a medical kit in his saddlebag. He relinquished his embrace around Tug's neck, patted him gently several times, and then reached for the saddlebag. "Steady, boy, steady. Take it easy. You'll be fine." Will opened the medical pack and studied it for a few seconds. He'd need a bandage pad to staunch the flow of blood, and a long pressure bandage to hold it in place. He found both items and placed them ready. But before he could bandage the wound, he'd have to clean it. He took a gauze pad and a small jar of the pungent ointment that would cleanse the wound and dull the pain. He never liked handling the medication, as it was derived from wormweed, and the smell reminded him of an unpleasant episode many years ago. But he knew it was a highly effective treatment for any wound. He also took his canteen from the saddle pommel and unstoppered it, pouring a large amount of water over the wound. The blood continued to flow as the water hit it, the color diluting to pink at first, then turning deep red again. He dabbed at the wound with a linen pad, trying to be as gentle as he could, yet knowing he had to use some firmness. Tug flinched once, then stood still. "Good boy. That's it. You'll be fine," Will crooned. His eyes narrowed. As he cleared the blood momentarily, he could see how deeply the wolf's fangs had torn into Tug's flesh. This was no superficial wound, he realized. He might be able to render first aid, but Tug was going to need help far beyond his limited skill. He pushed the negative thought aside, then smeared a liberal dose of the pain-killing cream into the wound. Again, Tug trembled slightly, but made no complaint. Soon, Will hoped, the analgesic properties of the cream should take effect. Now he braced his largest bandage pad over the wound and held the end of a rolled linen bandage against it. He tossed the rolled end over Tug's withers, leaned under him to retrieve it, and wound it under his body and up over the bandage pad. Then he repeated the process over and over until the linen wrapping held the pad firmly in place. As he watched, the bandage slowly turned red with seeping blood. But then the coagulant mixed into the ointment took effect and the blood slowed. He stepped back and surveyed his work. Then his eyes blurred with tears again, and he moved forward, embracing the horse, careful to avoid the area of the wound, resting his head against the rough, shaggy coat. "Oh God, Tug, please be all right." Tug shifted awkwardly. The pain in his right shoulder had lessened dramatically with the application of the salve. But when he tried to put weight on the right foreleg, it gave way under him. "I'll have to get you to the closest farm," Will said, thinking desperately. It would be a long walk with Tug limping on 3 legs, but Will had already realized that he would have to go for expert help, and he couldn't leave Tug alone in the forest in this condition. He took Tug's bridle and began to lead the way back towards the second farm that he had visited earlier that day. It was the closest to the spot where they now found themselves, and he remembered there had been a sizable barn there where Tug could rest while Will went for help. With any luck, the farmer might have a horse he could borrow. The thought saddened him. Many times over the years he had ridden to fetch help, but he had always done so with Tug. Now he would be leaving the little horse behind while he rode a strange horse to bring back the expert help that Tug needed. The realization only served to heighten his fears as Tug hobbled along behind him.